We're here at Château Brion in the tasting room together with Prince Robert of Luxemburg and Jean-Philippe Delmas, winemaker at Brion and La Mission Brion. Jean-Philippe, can you tell us a little about the vintage 2011?
Yes, I can do that, but first I want to say now also winemaker for Château Quintus, because we just bought this vineyard at the end of June last year. On the 2011 vintage, it's what we call in Bordeaux classic vintage. Because we have one of the most beautiful balance between the tannic structure and the level of acidity. And so we have a lot of freshness in these wines, but also they are quite concentrated. About the style, it's close to the 08, for example. But for me at this stage, the 11 is much more approachable than the 08 in March 09. It's a mix between the 08 style with the charm of the 01. For us, it's a very good vintage. Of course, it's not as exceptional as the 09 or 10, the last two blockbuster vintages that we had in the last 2 years.
Can you tell us about the weather patterns during 2011? We understand it was a little different this year.
So it was different, and especially the spring was the driest spring ever. You know, we have a adage in French that the wines must suffer to make a great wine, and during the spring period, the vine suffered for sure, and especially because almost no rain between April and June, but also at the end of June, the 26th and 27th, we have two very hot, very warm days, almost close to 40 degrees Celsius. So for the vines, it was a very tough time.
Did you also suffer as a winemaker in making this wine due to the different climate conditions?
For sure. Now, a lot of work we have done outside in the vineyard and here in the vat house. The harvest was quite heterogeneous, with some differences between each bunches and in the same bunches between each berries. We did harvest in a way of sauterne to pick up only the best berries. It took minimum 1 month with 100 pickers to do the harvest of only 50 hectares. So it means that we took a lot of time. The pickers have made a wonderful job. But also we have a new optical sorting machine to select the berries by the shape. If the berry is not perfectly round, is eliminated, and also if the berries is not perfectly red, so by the shape and the color. This is the third year. For 09 and 10, this machine was not very useful, but this year it was very useful. We have eliminated some roughly 5% of the crop only by this machine, and I think the result is there.
Sometimes you see in the different vintages that a certain type of grape performs extra well. Did 2011 have any of these specifics?
No, I think there's no winner this year. I think you can find some very great wine in Médoc, in Graves, here in Pessac-Léognan, or on the right bank, Saint-Émilion-Pomerol. But as I said before, the harvest was quite heterogeneous, so means Bordeaux in general is heterogeneous. So you have some great wines and some others were not so great. So it's I think it's a good year for the taster to come en primeur, because in 09 or 10, everything was great. So it was not necessary to come and to taste. But this year, I think it's very important for the trade, for the critics, to come and to taste every wines.
I would also say that for our estates, when you're talking about a particular varietal, one of the things that sets apart La Mission and Brion is that we have in our vineyard 3 or 4, as far as the reds are concerned, grape varietals. And so every year, Jean-Philippe Delmas and his team have a more difficult job because they have to decide exactly how to produce these blends. But on one other hand, have more flexibility because we go towards producing the best possible Mission or Brion. And therefore, the blend might vary to be able to meet exactly the kind of issues that you were alluding to. each vintage. Obviously to produce 100% Mission, 100% Haut, but ultimately to use whatever is best, whether it's the Merlot, the Cabernet Sauvignon, the Cabernet Franc, or the Petit Verdot. For Quintus, we have two grape varietals, Cabernet Franc and Merlot, so that's more restricted, but the luxury that we have there is, as we've discovered in this new terroir, we have multiple different slopes and microclimates within the same terroir, because we have 4 different directions that the property is leaning in, as you'll see if you come and visit our estate. We have the southern slope, the western slope, the northern slope, and we have the eastern plateau that all give very different styles of wines, and then we can have that, you can have that flexibility as a winemaker. Sure. But if the vine needs to suffer, this year if the winemaker suffered, he did well, so I think suffering might be something that we need more of. Thank you, sir. La Mission is a much smaller property, half the size of Brion. As you know, from a size basis, Brion is the smallest of the first growths of Bordeaux. It's about half the size in hectares of the average of the other first growths of Bordeaux. So we're only about 50 hectares here, whereas some of them reach over 100 hectares. La Mission is half the size of Brion again, so it's about 26 hectares. We're getting to grips with a new terroir with Quintus, which represents only about 14 hectares under vine. The property is 17 hectares, but tiny production. And with these particular wines, whether it's the Dragon of Quintus or Quintus, we've only produced about 17,000 bottles of each wine this year. So much smaller than what we have in La Mission or Brion. But then the terroir is much smaller.
Would you like to give us some tasting comments on the different wines you have in front of you?
The first is Le Dragon de Quintus, the second label of Château Quintus. The other one is La Chapelle de la Mission, the second label from Château La Mission Brion. And the last is Clarence de Brion, the second label of Château Brion. And of course, after the 3 Grand Vins, for the style of the wines from Saint-Émilion are much more rounder, softer than the wine from Pessac because of the Merlot and the Cabernet Franc. You can feel the density, but also the sweetness of the wines. For the wine from Pessac, it's a little bit more tannic, the structure is there. I think the most charming wines is maybe La Chapelle de la Mission. Clarence is more serious, if I may say. You have this link between the second label and the Grand Vin. So you have all these, the same style, but with a bigger concentration for all these wines, and especially, of course, for Quintus. It's an amazing wine at this stage because it's very easy to drink. It's full body, but it's so charming. After you have 2 big guys, they are not ready, not yet. And especially this year it's very special because the style of La Mission is always more charming than Brion, and Brion is more austere. But for this vintage, we mixed the styles, so La Mission is a bit more austere and Brion more approachable.
It's interesting because we're used to at this stage to taste these wines en primeur, and it's true that the bogey here, very different, is the Quintus. To see this softness, to see a different structure. And we talked obviously about the fact that it's different grape varietals. We just have the Merlot and the Cabernet Franc, which in themselves, you have the very ripe Merlot, which I think brings this extraordinary softness. And we tasted some of the vats together when we first were bringing them in. And you just had this sweetness, a round sweetness that was very intense. That we don't have, but that you don't have this blockbuster side of some of, especially with the Cabernet Sauvignon in these wines, I think that bring the tannic structure, that add enormously to that tannic structure, which you don't have here. So it's also about us learning and our palates evolving at this particular stage to see how we adapt that to this new estate. It's very exciting, it's a lot of fun.